Welcome to the Adoption and Foster Care Journey, a podcast to encourage, educate, and equip you to care for children and youth through adoption, foster, and kinship care. Hosted by an adoptive mom with over 22 years of kinship and adoptive parenting experience. She's on this journey with you. Please welcome Sandra Flach.
Now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us. That is Ephesians 3, verse 20. I am your host, Sandra Flach. Welcome to the Adoption and Foster Care Journey, where I am always here to encourage and equip you for your parenting journey. As a mom myself of 8, 5 through adoption, including 2 young adult sons, both diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome. I know the struggles that come from raising children with trauma histories and prenatal exposure to alcohol and other substances. So I know how important it is to have community and resources and to learn and to continue to grow and to just feel like you have somebody to lift your weary arms, right? So my hope is that this podcast will become that for you, that it will become an invaluable resource for your adoptive and foster parent journey. So speaking of resources, I want to give a little teaser about my upcoming to be released devotional book. It's titled Soul Care Saturday, 52 Devotions for Foster and Adoptive Moms. Right now, it is in the hands of my editor, and I'm hoping and praying that it won't need too much overhaul and that we will be able to start getting it to print. So I'm hoping that by November, adoption month, that it will be available. So stay tuned to this podcast and our social media and all of our places so that you can stay tuned and find out when it's ready for you to grab a copy. Please be sure also to like and follow our new social media pages so that you'll be in the know. We created the Adoption and Foster Care Journey pages on Instagram. We are at AFC_journey. And on Facebook, we are at the Adoption and Foster Care Journey. So I look forward to connecting with you in those places. And I would love to connect with you in person. For my Ohio friends, I will be leading an FASD workshop for the Hope Bridge folks on Saturday, September 6th in Hartsville, Ohio. So registration is on the Hope Bridge website, and there is a link in the show notes below. And that is one place that I'll be that's going to kick off my travel and speaking and leading workshop season for the fall. I will also be at the Christian Alliance for Orphans Summit. The CAFO Summit this year is in Houston on October 1st through 3rd, where I will be leading an FASD workshop. The title of it is Hope Beyond Frustration, Incremental Growth Through Simple and Consistent Practices. And on the same afternoon, I think these are both on Thursday, but you'll have to check the CAFO schedule. That same afternoon, I'm also hosting a meetup for parents and caregivers of kiddos with FASD, diagnosed or not. They're going to give us a room where we're going to get to meet up, have some fellowship, encourage one another, and just meet and connect as parents and caregivers of kiddos with FASD. Then I will be at Replanted. The Replanted conference is in Chicago on October 23rd through the 25th, where I will be leading a workshop there called Wired Differently, Understanding FASD, Trauma, and the Brain. And at both CAFO and at Replanted, we will have an exhibit table with resources. It'd be a spot where you can find me very easily, connect with me, stop by, take a selfie, we'll get to chat and talk in person. So I hope that you will take advantage of any one of those conferences. I have a few more that are coming up in the new year I'm super excited about that I'll be letting you know where I'll be. But I find that these conferences are especially CAFO and Replanted because it's an opportunity to connect with others who are on this same journey and learn from one another and encourage one another. And retreats like Replanted are incredible opportunities to just get your cup full as well. So hope you'll check those out. Hope to see you at least one of them. Now, today we have a special guest, an adoptive mom. Wendi Cross is with us. Wendi is the love and prayers behind xHope, a graduate of the University of Nevada, Reno. She was a 4-year collegiate cheerleader on scholarship and ended her cheer career as a national cheer judge and ESPN2 announcer. I don't think I've ever had that in a bio before. After years of teaching elementary school and judging cheer, Wendi has now dedicated herself wholeheartedly to supporting the mission of xHope. Her passion is to see every child placed in a forever family, and she gives her time, talents, and treasures to empower one family at a time. She's the wife to Rick. Wendi is the mother of 6 wonderful children, including a son she and Rick adopted from Africa, and their youngest is adopted through Sacramento County. She is also a proud mother-in-law and the new grandmother of 3 precious littles. Wendi travels to Redeemer House Children's Home in Uganda 3 to 4 times per year, working side by side with the international ministries of xHope. As the co-founder and CEO of xHope, she has spoken at numerous community and private events. Her desire is to share her family's personal journey through international and local adoption, foster care, mission work, orphan care, and parenting, spurring others on to dream big and take action. Her new book, Not Forgotten, is a powerful reminder that even when we feel alone, God is near. Wendi speaks and writes with transparency, and you will leave inspired to make a difference, one child and one family at a time, beginning with your own and expanding your influence across the street and across the seas. She can't wait to cheer you on in life and love, because once a cheerleader, always a cheerleader. Please welcome Wendi Cross. Hey, Wendi, welcome to the show.
Hi, Sandra. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be with you this morning.
I'm excited to be with you. We just were catching up, and turns out we were side by side last year at CAFO. Our exhibit booths were next to each other, and I think we swapped books. And then all this time has transpired, and now we're finally together on the show. So thank you so much for being on.
Yes, and we get to see each other in person at CAFO soon, so that's
Yeah.
fun.
Very soon we'll be at it again. Super
Yeah.
excited. So I'm thrilled that our listeners are going to get to know you and your family, your work, your ministry, the missions that you're doing. And I always love to start at the beginning of an adoption story. So I know that you and your husband Rick have, I believe, 3 kids biologically, and 4 kids biologically. I read your book. I should know this, but I can't keep track of my own. So yeah. And then you did adopt 2, correct? Got
Yeah.
that part right. So what led you and Rick to pursue adoption?
Wow. Oh my goodness. We were not born and raised in Christian homes. We had never known anyone to adopt, and so it was definitely something that happened really supernaturally. Rick went on a mission trip to Ethiopia, and we had 4 biological kids at the time. And to be honest, our license plate said game over. We had 3 boys and finally got our 1 girl, and I was a stay-at-home mom. And my goodness, did I think my life was too full for anything else? But I'll never forget. Rick went on a mission trip to Ethiopia, and he had, this will definitely say my age, but he had gone into an internet cafe and was Yahoo messaging me. And he's an ex-football player, so like 6'6", 350 pounds. And he's like, I am crying so hard. I am going to have to pay for this keyboard. He said, my life has been wrecked. Like, get ready. Our lives will never look the same in America. And I'm like, oh no, he's going to have me sell all the things and we're moving to Africa. That's what I thought. But No, he came home and he actually had a photo book of the children in the children's home that he served at, that were all waiting for adoption. They were true orphans. They couldn't be reunified. And he said, like, as a family, we're going to sit down weekly and pray for each of these kids. And we had gotten to the picture of 11-year-old little boy named Nebiu. And he said, oh my gosh, he said, this kid is so cool. He's like a natural leader. He goes, but he's so discouraged. He's lost all hope of ever having a family because he's the oldest boy in the orphanage. And the orphanage has filled and emptied twice, and no one wants to take an older boy. And
Wow.
oh my goodness, we prayed and I cried and I could not sleep that night. I felt like we were praying for something we could be the answer for, and our oldest biological son was the exact same age. And I just lay there thinking, what if something happened to Rick and I and no one would take our older boy? And so I
Mm.
called up Rick. Hey, hey, I think Nebiu is our son. Can we adopt him? And he sat up straight in that bed and he looked at me and he said, you told me the game was over. If you are willing, start the paperwork tomorrow. And so we did. And we just took the biggest leap of faith that really we'd ever walked through. And Sandra, we relied on God in every moment of that, even to the smallest details of where we felt like we weren't supposed to tell anybody until Nebiu knew, because our family and our community had never been a part of something like this. And so I know that God was protecting us because we didn't get the support we thought we would when we
Mm.
said yes to this. And it was shocking to us, like naively shocking. That people
Yeah.
were like, why would you adopt someone from another country? We have kids here, you know, and
Mhm.
why would you adopt, you know, race came into it and economics, and you have a baby girl. What if this older boy does all the fears
Yeah.
you already prayerfully consider and have to cast out were
Yeah.
said out loud to us? And so just every little detail was in line with God's will, and he made it happen. And so a year later, we went and picked up our 12-year-old Ethiopian son named Nebiu, and we brought him home. And it's just been one of the most miraculous stories. I mean, you read the book, it just talks about how God redeemed and redeemed everything, even through the most difficult seasons of adoption, which you're familiar with. We had those too, right?
Yeah.
And then, yeah, and then after Nebiu, so now we had 5 kiddos, and we got a call from an estranged cousin of mine, and she was, I hadn't seen her since I was a little girl, and she said, hey, can you come in to the hospital? You know, my mom said you pray for kids in Africa, like we come pray for mine. And so we walked into the hospital here in Sacramento, California, and unfortunately, she was detoxing from meth, and she was completely unable to make any mentally clear decisions. And so the doctors were like, hey, do you know her? Like, can we put you on these medical records to, like, we don't know what to do with this baby. And we went in and saw the baby, and he was 9 pounds, 13 ounces, completely addicted to methamphetamines, on every kind of like monitor and feeding tubes and all the things. And he basically said, the doctor, if we take him off of this morphine drip, he will die of a heart attack. That's how high he is. And
Mm.
so we prayed for that baby, and we ended up bringing my cousin home from the hospital to care for her for a couple weeks. We got her in rehab. We took her every morning and every night and tried everything to make sure that she could get her baby back. And unfortunately, she was not in a position to stay in the rehab. And so they asked us to take Jason. So that was
Wow.
our second adoption.
And you formally adopted him as a baby.
We did. We brought him home from the NICU at 6 weeks old, and he was very, very, very sick. He was possible cerebral palsy. He was on a feeding tube. They said he'd never walk or talk. And to be honest, my husband and I, that was a no for us. Like, we really felt like Nebiu didn't even really speak English yet. Like, we were still adjusting to a biracial family, a new teenage boy. Like, we're like, Lord, I don't think we can do it. And to be honest, this is where the scripture of child life faith really came to life for us. We sat down with our kids, and every single one of our kids said, yeah, we have to. And they were willing to give up a lot in order for us to bring Jason home. And so we thought, man, if 5 kids, especially some old enough to really understand, are willing to lay down everything for this baby, how could we not?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I want to unpack so much of this story because there's so much in there. But I want to go back to, Neb comes home, he's 12,
Yes.
comes
Hmm.
home from Ethiopia, And I remember because we adopted siblings from Ukraine, and when the first three came home, they were like 3, 7, and 9. And I remember the crazy, right? I remember the
Mhm.
language difference, the food, like trying to figure out the food and their education and all of that. So what was that stuff like for you and Neb?
Oh man. It was tricky. But yeah, he spoke no English and he was 12 and he was very culturally aware. Obviously, at 12 years old in Ethiopia, a lot of kids are living on their own. I mean, so he was very much like a young man. Also hadn't been raised by a mom. And so like even attaching with me was more tricky than it was attaching with the kids or my husband. But talking about food, I remember being in Ethiopia and he loved like tomato, cucumber, spaghetti. So I had told my mom like, hey, when we get home, if you could have just like fresh cucumber and tomato cut up for him and maybe spaghetti, because I know he likes those three things. And he took a bite of our cucumber. He was like spitting it out. I'm like, oh no, these don't even taste the same, you know? But what we learned about him, which is so funny, is he would never say he didn't like anything. He would just get the hot sauce from the fridge and douse, I mean, cover the food in hot sauce. And I'm like, wow, he just really likes everything very spicy. Everything spicy. But then, like pizza, he wouldn't use hot sauce or fried chicken or like chicken, no hot sauce. And I'm like, weird. And then when he got older, he's like, "Oh no, mom." He's like, "I didn't like any of that. I just put hot sauce to cover the taste. I didn't want to be ungrateful." So
It is. It's something when and we don't really realize. I remember the two older kids when we brought them home, they were 7 and 9, and they'd been in an orphanage for since they were little. And I would be in this, so they like food in an orphanage in Ukraine is prepared in a separate room and then brought into the kids. So they didn't really interact with a whole lot of the food preparation. So I'm in the kitchen cooking and stirring something, I think it was probably spaghetti and meatballs. And I just remember the two older ones hovering over, one over each shoulder, like, what is this? What is this? And how do
yeah,
you explain spaghetti and meatballs, right?
yes.
So
Neb loved relish, but he didn't know what it was. So he would say he'd want a pickle sandwich. And so I'd pull out pickles. And he's like, no, 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 no. And that one actually took me a really long time to figure out what he was talking about. And then one time we were at a soccer game and they sold like hot dogs and the relish was, he's like, this one, this one. He'd be say green pickles sliced. And so I'd slice green pickles. No, no. Yeah. And so he was trying to tell me relish sandwich. I'm like, yeah, we don't do just plain relish sandwiches. That's not a thing.
no. I mean, we can laugh because some of this stuff seems, because I know, what about education? How is that? Because getting adjusted to school and what that looks like.
Yeah, so one of the things we did with Neb, so he ended up being older in age by like 10 months of our oldest bio, but we put him a grade under in school because our oldest bio was getting ready to switch to middle school, which mean they have 6 classes in a row. And we're like, there's no way we want to just put Neb in middle school. So we put him in 6th grade. And it was the last 3 months of 6th grade. So he did that with Colby, our oldest bio, and they were in that class together. And that teacher and principal of that school, oh my gosh, this is what I would encourage any adoptee families to do is really communicate what you're doing with the school or the community that you're going to be involved in because they watched his adoption journey on our blog. The whole class watched pictures. And so when Neb went into that classroom, again, not speaking any English, he was like famous to those kids.
And welcome, feeling
Oh, he was like a superstar. They loved him so much. My son got to go with us to pick him up, which was just a God gift at the end because it wasn't budgeted and we didn't know it was going to happen. And someone said, hey, we will pay for all of Colby to get to go because we think this is really important for him to see where his brother's coming from and why he's sharing the rest of his life the way he will be. And we're like, oh, we didn't think of that.
yeah.
So education, we were just so blessed to have a teacher that was so in tune. And so he stayed a second year and stayed with that whole next 6th grade class, but same teacher. And she was African American, which was really helpful for him to look like somebody. And then when we first brought him home, I kept him home and didn't send him to school until he finished the Rosetta Stone like English program. And I didn't realize till later, but he kind of felt like that was a punishment because in Ethiopia, it's a gift to go to school. And I was sending all my other kids to school, but I was making him stay home. And so he would be in there on Rosetta Stone and it would be telling him to say like cookie and he'd be like cookie. And then it would be like cookie. And he'd be like cookie and then he'd be like cookie and he'd just scream and I'd go running in there. I'm like, why you want a cookie? He's like, no, I do not like this, and so I would just go cookie in the thing and it would be, and he'd go, okay, thank you. And then I would walk away. So I just like helped him anytime I could. And then it made him think I was like for him. And so as soon
Oh,
as he finished Rosetta Stone, the reward was to go to school, and that actually worked. And then he actually went and could communicate some, which I think was helpful.
yeah. Oh, I love all the stories because we can look back on those and laugh, but there are some other adjustments
Oh,
quite so easy, right? So, in addition to the education and the food and all of that, our kids come with trauma, trauma histories and all of the things. So, what were those adjustments like? More of the trauma piece, the attachment piece. What was that like for you guys?
yeah, there was some really difficult seasons. And Neb openly talks about these and has given me permission to share. Like a lot of this is in our book. So he's 27 now, by the way, in full-time ministry. So he's very open about some of these things. But he went really astray and became very disrespectful and mostly to me, very, I'm just rude,
Mm.
unwilling to respect me specifically. And so when my husband was around, he did better and my husband would correct him. But again, I was a stay-at-home mom and I was with them a majority of the time. But at one point when my husband corrected him and was really gonna like grab at his shoulder and like look at him in his eyes. And as my husband went to like grab at his shoulder, it triggered abuse and trauma. And we were in our garage, and at the time we lived in town, and he was wearing his underwear and he ran away, um, and ran far. He ran like 4.5 miles to a friend's house that is really good friends of ours. So thank God. And he hid in their backyard and hid in bushes. And we couldn't find him. And we're like, oh, yep, we're going to be that family where the helicopter's saying missing Ethiopian boy in his underwear. Like that's going to be us. Um, and so there were some times, he went to soccer practice one time and he had a hard time with authority for sure. And especially if it was unjust, like if he did not do it and you accused him of it, or if you talked to him disrespectfully, he would respond the same way. So it took a lot of work, a lot of time building trust. But he went to his soccer training and they had a Hispanic trainer come in with a fully different culture, different way of coaching, didn't trust the guy. And the guy made him run because he was talking, but he wasn't talking. He was like, I did not talk. And the guy's like, don't talk back, like go take a lap. And so he ran and never came back. And the coach called, he's like, hey, Neb's gone. Like he was supposed to run a lap and he never came back. So he would run. He was like, nope, I'm out. And he was used to that because his entire childhood he was on the run. I mean, before the children's home, he lived in cornfields. And so he knew run and hide and you'll survive. So that trauma always triggered a run and hide situation. And so we even had to learn, Sandra, like in consequence or discipline, um, let him go to his room and say, we will talk, but when you're ready. And so we had to learn like he's not going to have a discussion with us until he's feels safe and settled. And safe and settled meant leave him alone for a little bit. And then he'll tell us like when you're ready, we'll talk about it, but you can't go anywhere until we do. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. And so how did ultimately you navigate through that? Because you said now he's a missionary, 27 years old, he's a missionary, obviously following the Lord. What were the things that helped you get from that, the trauma behaviors and all of that to where he is today?
So much prayer. Obviously, I give God all the glory for this story. I genuinely believe it's a miracle, and my heart also is aware that there's a lot of praying adoptive families and their stories don't end as well as this. And so I want to be sensitive to that. But so much prayer, so much communication, um, so much grace, like not giving them what they deserve. Really, really picking and choosing what do I really want to have a hard conversation about and what can I let go? You know, I remember saying, "Can I just sit with you?" You know, I remember one of our biggest breakthroughs was in high school, and he was off his rocker. He was naughty and hard to like. He was mean to me. And I just remember saying, "I know that you're not ready to talk, but do you think it would be okay if I just sit here by your bed and turn on music?" And he said, "You can, but don't talk to me." And it wasn't even about me. He was having a situation at school that triggered trauma and rejection, and he was at home and he was angry, not
Mhm.
crying, but angry,
Mhm.
and was shutting down. And so I turned on worship music and I sat at the edge of his bed and I just started singing. And then within like 15, and I don't sing well. It wasn't like this beautiful like worship, concert or anything, but I was praying quietly and I was just kind of like touching his arm a little bit. And then within maybe like 10 minutes or so, he broke down and he cried. For me, that was the first time I ever saw him like crying, crying, crying. He brought up things like, how could I love you when I didn't even cry when my mom died? I should have cried when my mom died. He was 2.5.
Mm.
You don't know, Neb. Like, there was things he believed about himself that caused him to feel even mad at him. Um, and so he cried out that day and we prayed together. But then I remember anytime I felt like he was off, I would say, "Hey, do you want to go? Why don't we go look for those new school shoes?" Or, "Hey, I'm gonna run to the grocery store. Would you come with me?" I just remember always wanting him to, I always invited him to come in
Mhm.
the car with me. Anytime we drove, I felt like, and we were one-on-one, which was really hard in a big family, I felt like he was open to sharing stories. And so being alone in the car and with no big agenda, no expectation of, oh, this is going to be the time when he tells me all the things. No. And so like if the one-on-one time was helpful without expectation, without pushing too hard. Um, and then the real healing for us happened every single year. I asked Nebiyu to go back to Africa on mission with me. We have a ministry there, so I go 3 to 4 times a year, and he never wanted to go. He said no when he was 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. And for his 18th birthday and graduation, he said, "Okay, I'll go." And so he hadn't been in 6 years. And when we went, we stayed in the children's home where he was raised. So he was reconnected with like the house mom and the pastor. And then we saw his older siblings, most of them half siblings, but we saw all of them. And the women in the village that were really good friends with his mom that kind of helped him survive through his orphan years. When they saw him, they were like crying out to God. It was like they saw an angel, like, "You are okay, you are okay." And he was, again, like that moment where he just cried out, like, "I have been okay, like, I'm okay." And I was not rejected, I was not abandoned. And I think that's where real healing happened for Nebu, was a mission trip to his country. But I also have done mission trips with other adoptees and kids, and I'm telling you, I believe so wholeheartedly in taking. I think all teenagers should go on mission trips to a third world country with their family, but there is something special about finding a really good organization that empowers the country that you're visiting and take them on a short-term mission trip to see what it's like in another country and how they're surviving there and how they're reliant on Jesus there and the things we don't get to see as much here in America. I think it's very healing.
Yeah, I agree completely with what you're saying. Our kids traveled. Some of our kids have gone on mission trips. We had friends that were missionaries for quite a few years in Cambodia. So some of our kids were able to go, and my husband went to that trip. It was sort of like because we were homeschool family, so it was like when you're a teenager, it's kind of like required part of your homeschool education. You have to go on a mission trip. So many of them went to Cambodia, and then some of them went to Ukraine, which is then where we adopted our kids from. So when we went to Ukraine for our adoption, we brought our 4 kids with us because it was important for us to see, for them to see this is they visited the orphanage, they met their siblings. They experienced the culture so they could at least, when we got home and when the going got tough, they could see where their siblings came from and what life had been like for them. And it was powerful for sure.
It's so important. Yeah, it is very powerful. Something happens there that is just pretty miraculous. And so I actually, to tell you the truth, I was going to this year at CAFO invite families, like let's do just a mission trip completely dedicated to foster adopt families.
Mm.
Wouldn't that be really incredible? Like our devotions could be about that. Like, yeah.
Yeah. It was powerful because I know we're going to get to your son Jason, but we did a kinship adoption as well. That was actually the first time we adopted because we also had never had aspirations to adopt or foster. We had three biological kids. I could have had the license plate,
Mhm.
say I'm done or game
Game
over.
over.
Could have had that. But then the Lord put a relative little girl into our family when she was 8. And it was hard because we didn't have any understanding of trauma or any of the things. And then eventually we adopted internationally, but she went on a missions trip with me before we adopted. We were feeling the call to adopt from Ukraine, and our church took a trip there. So I brought her with me. She was probably 14, I want to say at the time. And that was huge for her to see that, there are other kids who don't have parents, right? Their parents aren't in their lives. And and how much harder really in that environment, having been in an orphanage and whatnot. So that was really powerful for her. And she actually ended up going on and doing, after she graduated high school, she did a DTS program through YWAM, Youth with a Mission, in Ukraine, because she just had a heart for the folks, the people of Ukraine. So that was powerful for her.
Mhm.
It's definitely a game changer for our kids.
Yeah.
Sandra Flach, host of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, and FASD educator Debbie Raymond invite you to join Hope for the FASD Journey, a virtual support community for parents and caregivers raising individuals with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, diagnosed or not. This faith-based support community meets online 3 times each month, features special VIP guests, and a private Facebook group for members only, which includes Soul Care Saturday video devotionals led by Sandra and Deb. Both Sandra and Deb are adoptive moms raising kids with FASD and facilitators of the Facets neurobehavioral model. For details and to register, visit justicefororphansny.org/hope-community. That's justicefororphansny.org/hope-community.
So I wanted to ask you about your son Jason that you adopted. You kind of told that story a little bit. He had all of those health issues and things when he came home. What tell us a little bit more about what life was like after he came home. How old is he now? What's going on?
Yeah. So when he came home, 6 weeks old, possible cerebral palsy, he was only eating out of a feeding tube. And it was tough. We couldn't leave him unless it was with a certified nurse. He had severe medical issues. I mean, I remember having to buy a commuter car just because we were driving to specialists like 4 or 5 times a week. He was really sick. But we prayed every Wednesday night, like in a small group and with the kids. And my kids were so committed to getting that baby to drink a bottle. They just took it upon themselves to just practice. I mean, and the doctors told us the more you practice, the more likely he'll learn to suck and feel the reward of food. And so my boys, man, I'm telling you, they practiced with that bottle more than any kid would need a bottle. And honestly, he had his feeding tube out before he turned a year old. He was drinking a bottle. He was eating like them. I mean, I do think him being in a large family and the kids all wanting to be a part of his healing, I guess, it was just a gift from God because by the time he was 18 months, he was released from every single physical therapy, GI therapy, speech therapy, all the therapies by 18 months old. And so he's getting ready to go into his freshman year of high school. He has like impulsive behaviors and ADHD. But he's in mainstream school. He plays sports. He's very, very attached to us. And super kind. He can tell his own adoptive story. He does it all the time. He's such an advocate for adoptees. Like he just wants all adopted kids to know they're chosen. And so it's really precious. He's been such a gift to us. But these years are real challenging. Like he's really hard right now.
Yeah. And how old is he?
He just turned 14.
14. So it's interesting because two of my 5 adopted kids are diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome. And I know you said he was addicted to meth as a baby. Do you know if there's any FASD diagnosis among there?
There is not, but even in talking to you at the table and reading through it, I know that his mother drank alcohol and did meth the entire time, and so I'm confident that there's not a diagnosis, but he struggles with a lot of those symptoms. So I would not be surprised if he's just undiagnosed, and that is something that he.
And that's common for kids to be not diagnosed, or misdiagnosed. So they almost always get the ADHD diagnosis.
Yep.
Impulsivity is one of the primary characteristics of FASD. It's part of that executive function. So lots of things, and just, was wondering if that was part of your story because it's so prevalent among adoptive and foster families. But, like you said, most kids, you don't know that, but and most parents don't know about it, and most kids aren't diagnosed, or they have the whole alphabet soup of other diagnoses, which may or may not be accurate. It's highly likely that they all come under the umbrella of an FASD. So we talk about it a lot on this podcast. So that's why.
Sure. Yeah, no, I would think that would be a diagnosis if we felt like it would give us resources or do something more for him. I think, something you guys, I don't know if you talk openly about this, but I do. Our wrestle even currently is medication or not. And I know that so many adoptive families wrestle with this because we don't want to have to do that. And some are okay with it, some are not. And we waited and waited and waited. And for Jay, even now, like we just sit often and pray and have conversations about this because it helps him in school. If he takes ADHD medication, he can have a 3.0, 3.5. He got a 4.0. He was on honor roll last time for the very first time. But like summer, he's not on it at all, and he doesn't want to get back on it. And so it's just so difficult because I'm like, if you want to go to mainstream school, that's what helps. If you want to homeschool, you don't have to take anything, but he's so social and he wants to be a part of what's going on. And so, I mean, even to this day, like as you and I are talking, it's one of our biggest prayers because school starts next week. And we never want to make him do that. We
Right.
want him to realize that it's helpful. And so I will, or I don't want to, and let's find a different route for me.
Yeah, and medication is one of those things where you find families are either all for it or all against it, and until you have to face the like, we might need to do this. And for us, we never did any meds until our youngest. I think he was probably 14 when COVID happened, and his world just unraveled because he does not navigate change well. He needs consistency, and then of course when school abruptly stopped, and then in our state it was like, oh, we're going back next week, no, we're going back in 2 weeks, no, we're going back, like the not knowing. And then it triggered his trauma of, if my parents get this and die, I won't have parents again. So we went to medication to avoid a mental health crisis because he was spiraling. But also with his FASD, there is, and people can Google this and find it if you just search FASD medication algorithm, something like that. There's a 1-page document that was created by some doctors who did the research, and it's sort of like I don't know if you would say levels of medication that is safe with individuals with FASD, because there's certain ADHD medications that actually will have an adverse effect on kids if it's FASD, because it's a different part of the brain. That's one of the reasons why I'm passionate about it's important for parents to know and get the diagnosis, because you want to make sure that if you're using meds, you're going to use something that works as opposed to something that's going to make things worse. So so when we were going, okay, we're going to have to do meds. Okay, I printed that document off and brought it to our doctor, and I said, this is where I'm willing to start. With this medication. And so that's what we did. And he's ultimately now on 2 medications. And I also find that our kids, especially with FASD, they cycle through, like their metabolism is so much higher. So they require a higher dosage. So obviously you're having to work with the doctor on that. And for a while, this past winter, I'm like, I don't really know if this medicine is making any difference. Like, I'm like, if it's making a difference, like just like things would be so crazy if he wasn't on it. But he did not take his medication one morning, and he has a part-time job, and he went to work that night and just unraveled at work, and his boss called and said, I think, like, I don't know what's going on. He says he wants to retire, which is very common for my 19-year-old son to say that.
Yeah.
She said, but it's been busier. He washes dishes in a restaurant. It's been busier and he's done great. And tonight is not as busy and he's having a really hard time. And I'm like, oh, that's just so strange. And while I'm talking to her, I'm looking in the little dish we put his meds in the morning. His pills were still there. He hadn't taken them, and I hadn't noticed that he hadn't taken them. And I'm like, oh, wait, I think I know what's going on.
Yeah.
So I actually went into work, and because I didn't want him to get the idea of, oh, if I'm having a hard time, I could just leave work. So I went into work and washed dishes for 2 hours to help him get caught up because he had fallen so far behind. He was overwhelmed. Um,
Oh,
so, and now we just make sure, like, I make
yeah.
sure these are taken in the morning. But then I was like, I guess they are making a difference, right? Because it didn't, I was like, I don't know if it's making a difference, but it really is. But that is one of those things between, parents and their their child's doctor. But to be educated on what's going on, and prayer certainly is a big part of that. But we reached the point to where, and he's the only one who needed meds. His older brother, who has the same diagnosis, no meds. He does not need them. But every kid is different, and we have to have that wisdom, pray for that wisdom to know what they need and how we can help them.
Yep. Yep. And it's hard. And so I empathize with families trying and not trying and deciding absolutely not, and then saying, okay, maybe, because I've done all of that. I've done
Yeah.
all of that.
I think we all do. We all, like, yeah, because it's a hard journey, and sometimes we reach a point in the teenage years, especially, and like especially with kids who have prenatal exposure to alcohol and other substances, and of course the trauma on top of that, the teenage years, and you've got the hormones and all of the things going on. It tends to get harder for that season. So you're at that point, you're like trying everything, like give me everything that will help.
Yep. For real.
Yeah. So you chose the verse that I opened with, and I'll read it again for our listeners. Now, to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us, Ephesians 3:20, of course. What does that verse mean to you, Wendi?
Oh my goodness. It just means, I think anytime we say yes in faith to the Lord, it's so important to know that it's going to be Christ who's doing it in and through us. And of course he gets all the glory. But because of, our adoption journeys, we were able to start a ministry and a nonprofit called xHope, Christ's Hope. And it's unique because we've been able to use our international story to have an entire children's home and 2 schools and a church plant and farm and guest house in Uganda, where we've rescued and reunified hundreds of children and educate thousands. And then also here in the US where we live, we have an arm of our nonprofit where we get to meet the needs of foster adopt families during placement, or, when they get new children, extracurricular activities. So all of these things just birthed because God's that good and he likes to redeem these stories. He writes the best stories. And so because I really do believe it's him at work in us, and he does more than we dream or imagine. I would have never imagined that our adoptions would lead to us being able to use our story and impact, thousands of families like ours. And so it's Christ alone, and I'm so grateful.
Yeah, amen to that. And I know we were talking earlier, and it's like, we humbly put our yes on the table and step out in faith and trust the Lord. And really, we have no idea all of the amazing things he's going to do in and through that little yes, right? And I know we went on to start a nonprofit as well after all of our kids came home, and all of the things I do, including this podcast, all were birthed out of our adoption.
Yeah.
So, just being faithful and keeping our eyes on the Lord and being obedient and just wanting to be in his will. And he goes on and he does just amazing things. So it's so exciting. He writes great stories. You've written a great story.
Thank
So
you.
Your book is titled Not Forgotten. So
Yeah.
what inspired you to write the book?
So after Nebiu's healing, our trip to Ethiopia, when we were there, he looked at me and he said, Mom, do you think we can write my story? Would it be helpful for kids like me?
Mm.
And I had always felt like I was going to write. I had even gone to a writer's retreat like 5 years prior, but I didn't know how the book would end. Well, bringing Nebiu back from that Ethiopia trip with a healed heart, he came home and changed his major from construction management to social work. And then he
Wow.
reconnected with a young lady named Anna, who was also adopted out of his same orphanage by a missionary family in Fresno, California. And the two of them ended up getting married. And so they have a miraculous story that I was like, oh, I know how we can end this book. And again, it goes back to Ephesians 3:20. He does more than we imagine. He does. And so their story is proof of that. And so it was just an honor for me to write Neb's story and then interwoven, obviously, you read about our family and our testimonies and just God's faithfulness through all of that. So we're not forgotten.
I love it. I love it. And so where can our listeners find a copy of your book if they're interested?
Yeah, you can get the book on Amazon. It's available there. And then you can also visit my website, www.wendycross.com, and it's available there.
And that's Wendy with an I.
Yes. Uh-huh.
We will put a link in the show notes so that it makes it easy for our listeners to get to your website. I love that. And then you mentioned your nonprofit, which is xHope.
Missions.org.
.org. Okay, so they can go to their website. So tell us a little bit more because I know you'd been on mission trips because your husband was on a mission trip, but that's not the same as the organization that you founded, right?
Oh, yeah. So our organization that we founded is predominantly all of our programs are being done in Uganda by Ugandan staff, like kids that have graduated from our program and leaders we've raised up there. So we actually have 39 staff in Uganda, and they're all Ugandan. So we believe in empowerment. We believe in the kids being reunified back into the Ugandan families, which is 99% of the time possible. And so we do a lot of reunification. And then because we've been able to build schools there that are in our village, it was the way we really felt like we could love our neighbors best. It was to be able to educate their kids because our orphans were going to school, but their kids were not. And so we do a ton of outreach, which makes it possible for us to do very meaningful mission trips and bring teams. So we do bring teams with us on short-term mission trips 3 to 4 times a year. We do all of the mission training. And again, we love bringing young adults and teenagers with their families. Like to me, I feel like it's one of the most valuable gifts we can give our kids at that age. So if any of your listeners are interested in bringing a young adult or their teens, adoptive or not, on a mission trip to Uganda, we have an application process, and then yeah, we build up our teams and we go there, and according to what those teams are strong at is kind of where we tell our Ugandan staff, hey, here's who we're bringing. Let us know how we can best serve you. And then they come up with most of our outreaches. And so it's just a beautiful partnership.
Yeah, I love that. Love the work. The work keeps going on. So what is Neb involved in that? Because you said he's in ministry. What is he doing?
So Neb works for an organization locally as of right now, and he is overseeing a leadership college for young adults who are transitioning with looking for what is next in their life. So a lot of these kids have either come out of like juvenile hall or an adoptive family where they didn't, it didn't end well, or kids who have been rehabbed and then come into his leadership college. So there's a girls' campus and a boys' campus, and he oversees both of those. So he does a ton of mentorship and social work with young adults from the ages of 18 to 24, helping them launch.
Wow, that is incredible. I
Yeah.
love that. Love your whole story. And then Jason's going to middle school, did you say, or high school?
High school, he's going into his freshman year next week. So
Wow. So lots of good things going on in your family. And give us the web address for the ministry again.
okay, it's www.xhopemissions.org.
.org. Okay, so we will put a link, of course, in the show notes for that as well, so our listeners can learn more. And if you're interested in going on a missions trip or bringing your kiddos on a missions trip, Wendy will help you make that happen.
My favorite thing to do.
So exciting. So, as you know, most of our listeners are adoptive and foster parents like us. So, as we wrap up, Wendi, would you just leave us with some words of encouragement for especially us mamas we may be struggling with the hard?
Yeah. I encourage especially mamas that our prayer life matters for our kids. And I think one of the most difficult things to do is to be in the middle of the storm, to be in the middle of chaos, to watch some of the consequence of their birth parents really manifest in their lives when especially in their teenage years. And I would just say, man, be on your knees in prayer. Continue to surrender the outcome to the Lord because I feel like our prayers do not come back void as moms. We didn't say yes to this on accident. God has a plan and he writes stories of redemption over and over and over. And I think sometimes as adoptive parents, we think that bio kids maybe wouldn't wrestle with this. And the truth is, we have 4 of those too. And none of them have ever launched perfectly. All of them have made mistakes that have shocked us or surprised us. But God has written beautiful stories in all of their lives. And so just like don't lose hope in the fact that he hears every prayer. He holds us tight. He sees our tears. He loves our kids even more than we do. And he is in the business of writing the very best stories for our kids. So we can surrender them. And sometimes it takes us doing that minute by minute, morning by morning, and especially in the seasons where we just can't see through the fog. There's an end, and it's going to be good.
Wonderful words. Thank you so much, Wendi, for sharing your family's story and for encouraging us and for all that you're doing on behalf of orphans and vulnerable children in Uganda and locally. Love what you're doing, and thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. And Sandra, thank you for your good work. I think it's just so powerful that you've been able also to take your stories of your family and use them in a way that's empowering so many other families to have hope. So thank you for what you're doing.
Oh, well, thank you. And I'll see you in Houston in just a couple of months.
Yes, I'm excited about that.
Yeah, me too. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And thank you for listening to this episode of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey. I hope you were inspired and encouraged by my conversation with Wendi Cross. Be sure to check out her book, Not Forgotten, and visit the website for her nonprofit. The links, of course, if you scroll down in the show notes, you'll be able to see the links and find those there. So check those out. In addition to encouraging and equipping you through this podcast, of course, we've got other great resources for your parenting journey. You heard the commercial about our support group, our Hope for the FASD Journey online support community. It is one of my favorite things that I get to do because we get to connect 3 Tuesday nights a month through Zoom. It's all live and interactive, and myself and another adoptive mom, Debbie Raymond, we lead, and it's just a time to be able to share and learn from each other and pray for each other. And if you have a kiddo with FASD, whether it's diagnosed or not, you will want to be part of that group. So I hope that you will check that group out. And of course, I have one-on-one parent coaching if you're looking for something like that for if you're raising kiddos with FASD, and our online and in-person training. So you heard in the beginning, I'm doing a lot of travel. I do a lot of speaking in person, but we also do a lot of online workshops. And every month I offer a free 1-hour intro to FASD, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. And you'll learn all about the impact of alcohol on a developing baby, the primary symptoms, and then how to take a brain-based approach to parenting kids who are prenatally exposed. And then I also offer a 3-hour workshop every month. And you don't have to do both. It's not like the intro is a prerequisite. You could do either or, but if you want a more in-depth, there is a 3-hour workshop that I do online every month. And then I also do about twice a year, the deep dive, which is 5 3-hour workshops once a week for 5 weeks. And there's going to be one of those is on the calendar, or it should be going on the calendar where you can register for it, but it will begin I think it's October 30th, the last Thursday of October, and it will be 5 consecutive Thursday nights, except for I think Thanksgiving is in there somewhere. So of course we won't meet on Thanksgiving. It'll end the last, the first Thursday of December would be the last class. Anyway, lots of options for you. And of course, I travel and speak. So if you're having a retreat or you have a foster and adoptive parent group at your church or wherever, I travel. So online, in person, always love to connect, always love to speak on and share and talk about FASD and encourage you as well for your parenting journey. So you'll find all of the information for all of the things that I just listed on our website, justicefororphansny.org. Of course, there's a link in the show notes, but you can find all of that there, as well as my blog. I blog once a month. And we have a newsletter that you can sign up for if you want to receive my newsletter, just very specific to the adoption and foster care journey. Subscribe to this podcast, leave a review, and also share it with your fellow adoptive and foster parents so that they can be encouraged and equipped as well. Follow us on our socials, of course. And again, I'm just so grateful that you spent your valuable time with me today. I am grateful to have you along for the journey.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, brought to you by Justice for Orphans. We hope you were encouraged today. Please be sure to subscribe to this podcast and leave a review, and share it with your fellow foster and adoptive parent friends so they can be encouraged too. Be sure to find and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Justice for Orphans. And check out our website for vital resources at justicefororphansny.org.